The summer of 1887 came to Red Hollow like a sickness. Heat that made the wooden planks of the boardwalk crack and pop in the afternoon sun. Dust that settled on everything, coating windows, filling lungs, turning sweat into mud on a man's collar. The kind of heat that made tempers short and violence quick. Red Hollow sat in a depression between two ridges of red rock, hence the name, and it trapped the heat like a Dutch oven. 300 souls, give or take, depending on whether the mining crews were in town or up in the hills. One main street, two saloons, a general store that doubled as the post office, a church that hadn't seen a proper minister in 2 years, and a sheriff's office that might as well have been a storage shed for all the law it enforced. Because in Red Hollow, there was only one law that mattered: Briggs Calder's. Briggs owned the Silver Spur Saloon, the larger of the two drinking establishments, and he owned the men who drank there. Big men, mostly, hard men with scarred knuckles and dead eyes. They worked the claims up in the hills when Briggs told them to work, and they collected debts when he told them to collect. They kept order, Briggs said. His kind of order. He was a mountain of a man, Briggs Calder. 6'4" in his stockings, shoulders like a barn door, hands that could palm a man's skull like an apple. He'd been a boxer once, back east somewhere, Philadelphia, or maybe Baltimore. Came west after killing a man in the ring, or maybe after a fixed fight went wrong, or maybe just because the West was where men like him could be kings instead of criminals. The story changed depending on who told it and how drunk they were. What didn't change was the fear. Briggs Calder ruled Red Hollow through fear, and everyone knew it. Cross him, and you'd find your business burned down. Short him on a debt, and you'd get a visit from his boys. Look at him wrong, and he'd break your jaw right there in the street, and the sheriff, a weasel-faced man named Dobbs who drank for free at the Silver Spur, would write it up as drunk and disorderly and call it justice. Briggs had a brother once, Garrett Calder. Younger by 3 years, meaner by half. Where Briggs was brutal and direct, Garrett had been cruel and creative. He liked hurting people, liked watching them squirm. He ran poker games in the back room of the Silver Spur, games that somehow always ended with Garrett walking away with full pockets and the other players walking away with empty ones, if they walked away at all. 6 months ago, Garrett Calder turned up dead in an alley behind the saloon. Single gunshot to the chest. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything. And when the sheriff asked around, nobody remembered anything either. Briggs took that hard. Real hard. He'd always protected his little brother. Always cleaned up his messes. Always made sure Garrett got away with whatever he wanted. And now Garrett was gone. And someone had to pay. Problem was, Briggs didn't know who. So he made everyone pay a little bit at a time. He got meaner, more suspicious. He'd get drunk and start accusing people, random people sometimes, of knowing something, of hiding something. His boys got rougher with collections. The poker games got more aggressive. The whole town walked on eggshells, waiting for Briggs to explode. And on a sweltering Tuesday evening in late July, he did. The old man came into town on a dusty roan mare that looked as tired as he did. He hitched the horse outside the smaller of the two saloons, the Broken Spoke, run by a widow named Constance Miller, and shuffled inside just as the sun was setting. Nobody paid him much attention at first. Drifters came through Red Hollow all the time. Prospectors mostly, chasing rumors of silver that were always just over the next ridge, just a little deeper in the earth. They'd drink a little, resupply at the general store, maybe try their luck at the poker table, then move on. The desert was full of men like that, searching for something they'd never find. This old man looked the part. He was tall, but stooped, like the years had compressed him. 70, maybe. Hard to tell with the sun damage and the dust. He wore a long canvas duster that had seen better decades, patched in a dozen places with mismatched fabric. His hat was shapeless, brim stained dark with old sweat. His boots were held together more by memory than leather. He ordered whiskey, the cheap stuff, and paid with coins he counted out slowly from a leather pouch. His hand shook a little when he lifted the glass. He found a table in the corner, away from the few other patrons, and sat with his back to the wall. Constance Miller watched him from behind the bar. She was a handsome woman in her 40s, still strong from years of hauling kegs and breaking up fights. Her husband had died in a mining accident 4 years back, and she'd kept the broken spoke running through sheer stubbornness and the fact that her whiskey was cheaper than Briggs's. "You passing through?" she asked when she brought him a second pour. The old man looked up. His eyes were pale blue, faded like old denim. "Might be. Might be passing through or might be staying. Haven't decided yet." His voice was quiet, roughed up by decades of tobacco and dust. "This a friendly town?" Constance snorted. "Friendly as most. Less friendly than some." "That an answer? Best you'll get from me, mister. You got a name?" "Elias Crow." "Where you from, Mr. Crow?" "Lots of places." He sipped his whiskey, savoring it. "None of 'em home." Constance studied him a moment, then decided he wasn't worth the effort of conversation. She went back to the bar where two miners were arguing about claim boundaries in the slurred, circular way of men who'd been drinking since noon. Elias sat quietly in his corner, nursing his whiskey, watching the room with those faded blue eyes. An hour passed. Then another. The sun went down completely, and Constance lit the oil lamps. A few more people trickled in. A couple of ranch hands, a merchant who sold tack and leather goods, a woman who might have been a school teacher or might have been something else entirely. Red Hollow wasn't the kind of town where people asked too many questions about what you did for money. Around 9 o'clock, the door banged open and 3 of Briggs's boys walked in. The room temperature dropped about 10 degrees, figuratively speaking. Conversations died mid-sentence. The ranch hands suddenly found their drinks very interesting. Even the two arguing miners shut up. Briggs's boys were all cut from the same cloth, big, mean, and stupid in that particular way that made them dangerous. The one in front was called Dutch. Nobody knew if that was his real name or a nickname. And he had a scar that ran from his left eye down to his jaw, courtesy of a knife fight in Tucson. Behind him came Rafferty, an Irishman with fists like canned hams and a reputation for breaking ribs. And bringing up the rear was a kid they called Stick, because he was thin as a rail but quick with a gun. Dutch scanned the room, saw Constance behind the bar, and grinned. It wasn't a friendly grin. "Evening, Mrs. Miller," he said, too loud. "Briggs sent us to collect what you owe." Constance's jaw tightened. "I paid last week." "That was last week's payment. This week's a new week." "The hell are you talking about?" "I paid for the whole month." Dutch shrugged. "Prices went up. Inflation, you know, cost of doing business." "That's not how this works, Dutch. I had an agreement with—" "You had an agreement with Garrett," Dutch interrupted. "Garrett's dead. Things change." The room was silent now, everyone pretending not to listen while listening hard. Constance set down the glass she'd been wiping. "I already paid. You go back and tell Briggs—" "I ain't telling Briggs nothing except whether you paid or not." "What's it gonna be?" "I already paid." Dutch sighed like this whole thing was exhausting him. He looked at Rafferty. "She already paid. You hear that?" "Heard it," Rafferty said. "But we still need to collect, don't we?" "We do." "So I guess we got a problem." Dutch turned back to Constance. "You got till tomorrow noon to come up with what you owe. Otherwise, well..." He looked around the broken spoke, at the worn tables and the cracked mirror behind the bar and the oil lamps flickering in their sconces. "Be a shame if something happened to this place. Real shame." Constance's hand moved below the bar. She kept a sawed-off shotgun down there. But before she could grab it, Rafferty was already moving. He vaulted the bar in one smooth motion, surprising for a man his size, and caught her wrist. Now, he said softly. "No need for that." From his corner, Elias Crow spoke for the first time since the 3 men entered. "Let her go." His voice wasn't loud, barely carried across the room, but something about it made everyone freeze. Dutch turned slowly. "The hell did you say?" Elias set down his whiskey glass with a soft click. "Said let her go. You heard me fine." Dutch looked at this old, stooped man in his patched duster and broken-down boots, and he laughed. "You got any idea who you're talking to, Grandpa?" "I got an idea." Elias stood up, unfolding from his chair with the careful movements of someone whose joints didn't work like they used to. "I also got an idea that 3 grown men shaking down a widow for money she already paid ain't exactly something to be proud of." "You need to mind your business, old man." "This is my business. I'm a paying customer. Makes me invested in the establishment. Stick, The thin kid with the quick draw had moved to flank Elias without anyone noticing. His hand rested on the butt of his revolver. "You sure you want to make this your problem?" Elias glanced at him, then back at Dutch. "Already is my problem. You're interrupting my drinking." The absurdity of it almost made Dutch laugh again. Here was this fossil, this dried-up piece of nothing, talking back like he had any kind of hand to play. It was offensive, really, disrespectful. "Rafferty," Dutch said, "teach him some manners." Rafferty grinned and came around the bar. He cracked his knuckles, an unnecessary gesture, purely for intimidation, and advanced on Elias like a bear stalking a rabbit. "You got about 3 seconds to apologize and sit your ass back down," Rafferty said. "Otherwise I'm going to break every bone in your—" Elias moved. Not fast. Not in the way a young man moves, all quick twitch muscle and explosive power. No, Elias moved like water finding the path of least resistance. Rafferty threw a punch, a haymaker that would have taken Elias's head clean off, and Elias simply wasn't there anymore. He'd shifted his weight, rotated his hips, and Rafferty's fist whistled past his ear. Before Rafferty could recover, Elias's palm shot up and caught him under the jaw, a short, sharp strike that snapped Rafferty's head back. Then Elias's other hand grabbed Rafferty's extended arm, twisted it at an angle that made everyone in the room wince, and suddenly Rafferty was face down on the floor with his arm bent behind him in a way arms weren't meant to bend. It happened in maybe 2 seconds. Rafferty screamed. Dutch and Stick both went for their guns, but Elias was already moving again. He released Rafferty's arm and stepped into Stick's space before the kid could clear leather. Elias's elbow came up, almost lazy, almost gentle, and caught Stick in the solar plexus. The kid folded like a bad poker hand, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Dutch had his gun out now, but his hand was shaking, because what he'd just seen didn't make sense. That old man shouldn't have been able to move like that. Shouldn't have been able to put Rafferty down like he was nothing. "You shoot me in here," Elias said quietly, "and you're going to have to explain to Briggs why one of his boys killed a paying customer in front of half a dozen witnesses. That going to make your life easier or harder, you think?" Dutch's finger twitched on the trigger. For a long moment, the only sound was Rafferty groaning on the floor and Stick trying to remember how to breathe. Then Dutch lowered the gun. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, old man," he said. His voice was shaking with rage. "You know who you just—" "I know exactly who I crossed," Elias said. "Your boss, Briggs Calder, the big man in town, the one who thinks fear makes him invincible." He picked up his whiskey glass, drained the last swallow. "You go tell him that Elias Crow said to come talk to me himself if he's got a problem. I'll be right here." Dutch stared at him. "You're insane." "Maybe, but I'm still drinking, and you're still standing in my light. So either shoot me or get out." Dutch looked at Rafferty, who was struggling to his feet while cradling his arm. Looked at Stick, who was finally getting air back in his lungs but still looked green around the gills. Looked at the old man who'd just dismantled both of them like they were children. "Come on," Dutch said. "We're leaving." "But," Stick started. "I said we're leaving." They left. Dutch and Stick half carrying Rafferty between them, all three of them moving like wounded animals. The door slammed behind them. For a long moment, nobody in the broken spoke moved. Then one of the miners let out a breath he'd been holding and said, "Holy shit." That broke the spell. Conversation erupted, low and urgent, people processing what they'd just witnessed. The merchant was already heading for the door, probably to spread the word before anyone else could. The ranch hands were arguing about whether what they'd seen was real or if the whiskey had been stronger than they thought. Constance came around the bar, staring at Elias like he'd just sprouted wings. "You just called down hell on yourself, mister," she said. "You know that, right?" Elias settled back into his chair. "I've met hell. Wasn't impressed. Briggs is going to kill you. He's going to try. You don't understand. Briggs Calder doesn't lose, not in this town, not ever." Elias looked at her with those faded blue eyes, and for just a moment Constance saw something in them that made her take a step back, something cold and old and infinitely patient. "Everyone loses eventually," Elias said. "It's just a matter of when." News traveled fast in Red Hollow. By the time Dutch and his boys limped into the Silver Spur, Half the town already knew that some old drifter had put down two of Briggs's enforcers like they were nothing. Briggs was playing poker in the back room when Dutch interrupted. The interruption alone was enough to piss him off. He was up $300 and had a full house that was about to clean out a cattle buyer from Tucson, but the look on Dutch's face made him fold his hand and stand up. "This better be good," Briggs said. It wasn't good. It was humiliating. Dutch told it straight, giving credit where credit was due. The old man had moved like smoke, hit like a hammer, and made Rafferty and Stick look like amateurs. He didn't embellish, and he didn't make excuses. Just laid out the facts. Briggs listened without interrupting. His face didn't change expression, but his hands clenched and unclenched on the edge of the poker table. The other players, all locals who knew better than to say anything, quietly gathered their money and left. When Dutch finished, Briggs was silent for a long moment. "Where's Rafferty now?" he finally asked. "Doc's office. Thinks his shoulder's dislocated." "And Stick?" "He'll be fine. Just got the wind knocked out of him." "And this old man, this Elias Crow, he's still at the Broken Spoke?" "Said he'd be waiting for you." Briggs nodded slowly. "He said that. He said those words." "Yes, sir." "Said to come talk to him myself." "Yes, sir." Another long silence. Then Briggs smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Get the boys together," he said. "All of them. We're going to pay Mr. Crow a visit." "How many should I bring?" "All of them," Briggs repeated. "I want everyone to see what happens when you disrespect me in my town." "What?" They came an hour later, just before midnight. 15 men, all of them hard cases, all of them loyal to Briggs in the way that violent men are loyal to whoever pays them to be violent. They came on foot, boots thumping on the wooden boardwalk, spurs jingling in the quiet night air. The Broken Spoke was still open. Constance had tried to close early, but Elias had asked her not to. And something about the way he asked made her agree. So the lamps were still lit, and a few stubborn customers were still drinking, though most people had cleared out once word spread that Briggs was coming. Briggs kicked the door open hard enough to crack the frame. He stood there in the doorway, backlit by the street lamps behind him, looking like something out of a nightmare. His boys filed in behind him, spreading out to block all the exits. Some had guns drawn, others just stood there with their hands loose and ready, which was somehow more threatening. The few remaining customers evacuated immediately, squeezing past Briggs's men and disappearing into the night. Constance stayed behind the bar, her hand on that sawed-off shotgun again, knowing it wouldn't do her any good but holding it anyway. And Elias Crow sat in his corner, exactly where he'd been all night, nursing what had to be his 5th or 6th whiskey. Briggs walked slowly to the center of the room. The floorboards creaked under his weight. "You Elias Crow?" he asked. "I am." "You the one who put his hands on my boys?" "They put their hands on someone first. I just evened the score." Briggs nodded, like this confirmed something he'd been thinking. "You know who I am?" "I know you think you're important." A couple of Briggs's boys laughed nervously, then stopped when Briggs shot them a look. "I run this town," Briggs said. "You understand that? This is my town, my rules, and you just broke the most important one." "Which is?" "Don't fuck with me." Elias took a sip of whiskey. "Seems like a fragile system. One person stands up and the whole thing falls apart." Briggs's jaw tightened. "You got a smart mouth for someone who's about to lose his teeth." "I've been threatened by better men than you." "Yeah? Where are they now?" "Dead, mostly, but they died honest, which is more than you'll manage." That did it. Briggs crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and grabbed the edge of Elias's table, flipping it aside. Glasses and bottles crashed to the floor. Whiskey splashed across the worn boards. Elias stood up slowly, seemingly unperturbed. "My brother," Briggs said, his voice dropping to something low and dangerous. "Garrett, you know what happened to him? I heard he got shot. Murdered in a back alley like a dog. Maybe he had it coming." The room went silent. Even the sound of breathing seemed to stop. Briggs stared at Elias like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. "What did you say?" "I said maybe he had it coming. Man makes enough enemies. Eventually one of them does something about it." "You..." Briggs's hands clenched into fists. "You think you know something about my brother?" I know what people say. I know he ran crooked poker games. I know he took money from folks who couldn't afford to lose it. I know he wasn't half the man you pretend he was. You didn't know him. Didn't have to. I've known 100 men just like him. Small men with big appetites and no conscience. They all end the same way. Briggs reached down and grabbed Elias by the front of his duster, lifting him partially off the ground. Up close, the size difference was absurd. Briggs had 8 inches and probably 80 pounds on the old man. You're going to tell me what you know about Garrett, Briggs said. You're going to tell me who killed him, and then I'm going to decide whether you die quick or slow. Elias looked him dead in the eye. I don't know who killed him, but I can tell you why. Why then? Because he cheated the wrong person. Because he pushed someone too far. Because at some point, even a desperate man finds his backbone. Briggs's face went purple. He drew back his fist, and Elias spoke again, quieter now. Your brother wasn't murdered, Briggs. He was killed. There's a difference. The fist stopped mid-swing. Murder's what you do to an innocent man, Elias continued. What happened to Garrett? That was justice. Rough justice, maybe. Frontier justice. But justice all the same. I'm not saying he deserved it. I'm saying he earned it. Those are different things, but they lead to the same place. Briggs dropped him. Elias stumbled back, caught himself against the wall. Then Briggs grabbed a chair, solid oak, heavy as sin, and swung it like a club. That's where we started. The chair exploding across Elias's shoulders, the room holding its breath. The moment where everyone expected the old man to fall. But he didn't. The chair broke into pieces, legs and rungs scattering across the floor, and Elias just stood there, dust settling on his coat. He rotated his shoulder once, testing it, like someone had bumped him in a crowd instead of trying to break his spine. Then he turned around, and the room went cold. Because the way Elias looked at Briggs in that moment, there was nothing weak about it, nothing frail or old or helpless. His eyes were the eyes of a man who'd seen every kind of violence the world had to offer, and had long since stopped being impressed by any of it. That the best you got? Elias asked. Briggs took a step back. Actually stepped back despite himself, despite having 15 armed men at his back. Because somewhere in his lizard brain, in the part that still remembered when humans were prey instead of predators, something was screaming at him to run. Kill him, Briggs said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. Kill him now. His boys moved in, drawing guns and knives, surrounding Elias like wolves circling a wounded elk. Except Elias wasn't wounded, and he definitely wasn't helpless. What happened next would be talked about in Red Hollow for the next 20 years. Would become legend, embellished and exaggerated with each retelling until the truth and the myth were so tangled up that nobody could separate them anymore. But the people who were there, Constance behind the bar, Dutch, and the others who'd come with Briggs, even Briggs himself, they all agreed on the essential facts. Elias Crow dismantled 15 armed men in under 3 minutes. He moved through them like a scythe through wheat, every motion economical and precise. A gun hand twisted just wrong, bones snapping with sounds like green branches breaking. An elbow to a jaw, timed perfectly to redirect momentum into unconsciousness. A foot sweep that sent 2 men crashing into each other with a crack of skulls that echoed like a gunshot. He used their numbers against them, maneuvering so they got in each other's way, so their shots went wide or hit their own people. He read their intentions before they moved, saw the telegraphed punches and the desperate draws, and countered with the calm efficiency of someone who'd spent a lifetime studying violence, the way scholars study books. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't pretty, it was just ruthlessly, terrifyingly effective. Dutch went down with a dislocated shoulder. Another man, a brute named Carson, got his knee inverted with a stomp that made everyone in the room wince. Stick, who'd already been beaten once that night, tried to pull his gun and found his hand pinned to the bar with a thrown knife before he even cleared leather. One by one they fell, until the only man left standing was Briggs. And Elias, of course. Not even breathing hard. Briggs had his gun out now, a big Colt revolver, well-maintained, loaded with fresh rounds. He pointed it at Elias with both hands, trying to keep it steady. "Don't," Elias said. "You think I won't?" Briggs' voice was shaking. "You think I won't kill you right here?" "I think you're scared, and scared men make mistakes. I ain't scared of you, old man." You should be. Briggs pulled the trigger. The hammer fell on an empty chamber with a dry click. He stared at the gun in confusion, pulled the trigger again. Another click. Again. Click. The cylinder rotated, showing clearly loaded rounds, but none of them would fire. Elias held up his other hand. In it were 6 bullets, their primers dimpled from attempted firing. Percussion caps are tricky, Elias said. Too tight, and they don't strike. Too loose, and they fall out. Takes a delicate touch to adjust them just right. When did you... While you were pontificating. People who talk too much don't pay attention to their surroundings. Briggs looked at his useless gun, then at Elias, then at his men groaning on the floor around him. The empire he'd built through fear and violence was lying broken at his feet, and for the first time in his adult life, Briggs Calder felt genuinely afraid. Elias walked forward slowly. Briggs backed up until he hit the bar. Trapped. Here's what's going to happen, Elias said quietly. You're going to leave Mrs. Miller alone. You're going to stop shaking down everyone in this town, and you're going to think real hard about whether keeping your brother's memory alive through violence is worth dying for. You can't. I can, and I will. I've killed better men than you for worse reasons, but I'm giving you a choice because unlike your brother, you still have time to be better than you are. People will talk. I'll be finished in this town. Then maybe it's time to find a new town. Elias picked up one of the fallen chairs, set it upright, and sat down. Or maybe it's time to be a different kind of man. Your choice. But make it quick because my patience ain't what it used to be. Briggs stood there, trapped between his pride and his survival instinct. Around him, his boys were struggling to their feet, collecting their dignity and their weapons. None of them looked eager for round 2. Finally, Briggs spoke. This isn't over. It is for tonight. I can't just... You can, and you will, because the alternative is I embarrass you worse than I already have, and then nobody in this territory will take you seriously ever again. At least this way, you can pretend you're being merciful, letting an old man ramble while you plan your next move. Save face. It was a lifeline, and Briggs grabbed it. He straightened up, trying to reclaim some authority. Fine, he said. We're leaving, but you watch your back, old man. This town's smaller than you think. It's bigger than you believe, Elias countered. You've just been standing in the middle of it so long you can't see the edges anymore. Briggs gathered his men and left, trying to maintain some dignity and retreat. The door closed behind them, leaving just Elias and Constance in the ruined saloon. Constance came out from behind the bar, stepping carefully over broken glass and splintered wood. Who the hell are you? She asked. Just a tired old man who wanted a quiet drink. Bull. Tired old men don't move like that. Don't fight like that. Elias sighed. I used to be other things. Before I got tired. What things? Doesn't matter. That was a long time ago. It matters tonight. It's going to matter tomorrow when Briggs comes back with more men and more guns. He won't. How can you be so sure? Because he's thinking right now, and the more he thinks, the more he'll realize he doesn't actually know who I am or what I can do. Fear of the unknown is stronger than fear of the known. He'll hesitate, and hesitation becomes waiting, and waiting becomes acceptance. Constance shook her head. You're either the smartest man I've ever met or the craziest. Can I be both? Despite everything, she laughed. Then she looked around her destroyed saloon and stopped laughing. I can't pay you, she said. For what you did tonight, I barely make enough to keep this place running as it is. I didn't do it for pay. Then why? Elias stood up, stretched his back with an audible crack. Because I was sitting right there. Because you make good whiskey. Because sometimes the right thing to do is also the easiest thing to do, and people forget that. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. You should get some sleep, Mrs. Miller. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Where are you going? Got a horse that needs tending, and I'm still deciding whether I'm staying or going. I thought you said Briggs wouldn't come back. I said he won't come back tonight. Tomorrow's a different day. Everything changes in the morning light. He stepped out into the night, leaving Constance alone with broken furniture and the lingering smell of gun smoke and fear. Outside, Red Hollow slept uneasily. Somewhere in the darkness, Briggs Calder was nursing his wounded pride and planning his next move. Somewhere else, the people who'd witnessed what happened in the Broken Spoke were telling the story to anyone who'd listen, adding details and subtracting others, transforming fact into legend. And Elias Crow walked slowly toward the livery stable where his roan mare waited, feeling every one of his 70-odd years in his bones, wondering if maybe, just maybe, he'd made a mistake by stopping in Red Hollow at all. But it was too late now. The stones were in motion. The story had started. And stories like this, they had a way of reaching their natural conclusion, whether you wanted them to or not. The horse was exactly where Elias had left her, standing in the third stall from the door, with her eyes half closed in that patient way horses have when they're used to waiting. Her name was Molly, though Elias rarely said it out loud. Seemed silly, talking to a horse like she understood. But she was good company, better than most people, and she didn't ask questions he couldn't answer. He rubbed her muzzle, checked her water, made sure the livery boy had actually given her the grain he'd paid for. The kid was nowhere to be seen, probably scared off by all the commotion. Smart kid. Elias's hands were shaking now, just a little. Delayed reaction. It always happened after a fight, had since he was young. The adrenaline would burn through him like kerosene, make him fast and sharp and dangerous. And then afterward his body would realize what it had just done and try to shake itself apart. He'd learn to ride it out, breathe slow, wait for the tremors to pass. He sat down on a hay bale and let his head drop into his hands. Stupid. Coming here was stupid. Getting involved was stupider. He should have kept riding when he first saw Red Hollow on the horizon. Should have trusted his instincts that told him frontier towns were all the same. Corruption wearing a tin star, violence dressed up as order, good people too scared to be good. But the horse had been tired, and he'd been thirsty, and Constance Miller's whiskey had been cheap. Now he'd kicked a hornet's nest and would have to live with the consequences. The livery door creaked open behind him. Elias's hand went to the knife in his boot, old habits, but he didn't turn around. "You can come in," he said. "I ain't gonna hurt you." Footsteps, light ones. Then a voice, younger than he expected. "Everyone's talking about you." Elias looked up. A boy stood in the doorway, maybe 12 or 13, all knees and elbows and badly cut hair. He wore clothes that had been patched so many times they were more patched than original fabric. His face was dirty, but his eyes were bright with something Elias recognized. Hope, maybe. Or just the desperate need to believe in something. "People talk too much," Elias said. "They're saying you beat up 15 of Briggs's men, by yourself." "It was more like 12, and I didn't beat them up so much as convince them to sit down." The boy grinned. "Dutch has a broken nose. Rafferty can't lift his arm. Stick's hand is so swollen he can't even hold a fork. They'll heal. Everyone's saying you're some kind of gunfighter, like in the dime novels." "I'm not." "Then what are you?" Elias looked at the boy for a long moment. "Tired. I'm tired." The boy's face fell a little, like he'd been expecting a better answer, a more heroic answer. He shuffled his feet in the hay. "My name's Thomas," he said. "Thomas Yates. My ma runs the boarding house on 3rd Street. "That's so?" "She says you're probably going to get killed tomorrow. Says Briggs won't let what happened stand. Says he can't afford to look weak." "Your ma sounds smart." "She is, but she's also scared. Everyone's scared of Briggs, except you." "I'm scared of lots of things, Thomas. Briggs just ain't one of them." "Why not?" How to explain it to a kid? How to tell him that when you've seen the things Elias had seen, done the things he'd done, a saloon brawler in a nowhere town didn't even register as a threat? That the things worth being scared of weren't men with big fists and loud voices, but the quiet moments when you realized you'd become something you never meant to be? "Because I'm old," Elias said finally, "and old men stop being scared of dying. We get more scared of living wrong." Thomas chewed on that for a second. "I don't understand." "You will. Give it 60 years. The boy laughed, then caught himself, like laughing might be disrespectful. "Are you really staying, or are you leaving tonight before Briggs can find you?" "Haven't decided yet." "I hope you stay. I think maybe things could be different if you stayed." "Different how?" Thomas shrugged. "Just different. Better, maybe." Ma says Red Hollow used to be a good place before Garrett got killed and Briggs went mean. She says people used to help each other. Now everyone just keeps their heads down. Towns change. People change. But they can change back, can't they? If someone showed them how. The naked hope in the boy's voice made Elias's chest hurt. He wanted to tell Thomas that it didn't work like that one old man couldn't fix a broken town, that violence only ever led to more violence, and the best thing anyone could do was keep moving and hope they didn't leave too much damage in their wake. But he looked at Thomas's face, at the dirt and the poorly cut hair and the patched clothes, and saw himself at that age. Saw the kid he'd been before the war, before everything went wrong, when he still believed that good men could make a difference just by being good. Yeah, Elias said quietly. I suppose they can. If they want to bad enough. Thomas's face lit up. So you're staying? For now. Got to see how tomorrow shakes out. Will you teach me? Teach you what? How to fight, how you fought tonight, how to make bad people sit down. Elias shook his head. You don't want to learn that, son. Yes, I do. I want to be able to protect my ma. Want to be able to stand up to people like Briggs. Standing up to people like Briggs is how you end up buried in the ground before you're 20. But you stood up to him, and you're not buried. Give it time. Elias stood up, his knees popping like firecrackers. Go home, Thomas. Your ma's probably worried. Will I see you tomorrow? Maybe, if I'm still here. The boy hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, then just nodded and left. The door swung shut behind him, leaving Elias alone with Molly and the smell of hay and horse. He checked his gear one more time, force of habit, then laid out his bedroll in an empty stall. The livery owner wouldn't mind, probably wouldn't even know. And Elias preferred sleeping near his horse anyway. Hotels made him nervous. Too many walls. Too many ways for someone to trap you. He lay down on the bedroll using his saddle as a pillow and stared at the ceiling beams. Moonlight came through the gaps in the roof, painting silver stripes across the darkness. Sleep didn't come easy. It never did anymore. His mind kept running through everything that had happened, everything that could happen, all the ways tomorrow might go sideways. He thought about Briggs, about the wounded pride in the man's eyes when he'd left the broken spoke. Thought about Constance Miller and her sawed-off shotgun and her stubborn refusal to close her saloon. Thought about Thomas Yates and his patched clothes and his desperate hope. Thought about Garrett Calder, dead 6 months in an alley behind the Silver Spur. Around 3 a.m, Elias finally drifted off into a light, restless sleep, punctuated by dreams he wouldn't remember come dawn. The sun came up like it always did, indifferent to the problems of men. Red Hollow woke slowly, people emerging from their houses and shops with the careful movements of folks expecting trouble. Word had spread fast. The whole town knew what happened at the Broken Spoke. Now they were waiting to see what would happen next. Elias woke with the sun, his back complaining about the hard ground and his shoulders reminding him that he'd taken a chair to them last night. He rolled up his bedroll, saddled Molly, and walked her down to the water trough at the end of the street. The town watched him from windows and doorways, curiosity and fear in equal measure. At the general store, he bought coffee and jerky with coins from his leather pouch. The proprietor, a nervous man named Jessup with spectacles and thinning hair, took his money but wouldn't meet his eyes. You should leave, Jessup said quietly as he made change, before things get worse. Worse for who? Everyone. Briggs is already talking to the sheriff. They're saying you assaulted 15 men without provocation. Self-defense don't count when it's 15 against 1. Self-defense counts exactly the same no matter the numbers. That's the whole point of self-defense. Not in Red Hollow it don't. Not when the sheriff's in Briggs's pocket. Elias pocketed his change. Appreciate the warning. He walked back outside into the morning heat, already building toward another scorcher. Down the street, he could see a knot of men gathering outside the Silver Spur. Briggs's boys, probably, planning their next move. Elias went back to the livery, tied Molly to a post where she'd have shade, and walked to the Broken Spoke. Constance was already up, sweeping broken glass into a pile near the door. She'd boarded up one of the windows with spare planks. Her hair was tied back with a kerchief, and she looked like she hadn't slept. Morning, Elias said. She looked up, surprised. You're still here. Apparently. I figured you'd be halfway to the next territory by now. Still deciding. He picked up a fallen chair, examined it, found it mostly intact, and set it upright. Need help cleaning up? I need a lot of things. Help cleaning up is pretty far down the list. What's at the top? She leaned on her broom, considering. Money to replace what got broken. A new lock for the back door. One of Briggs's idiots kicked it in on his way out. A stiff drink, though it's too early for that. And maybe a miracle or two. Fresh out of miracles, but I can fix a door. Why would you do that? Because it needs fixing, and I'm standing here. Constance studied him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. You're a strange man, Elias Crow. I've been called worse. They worked in silence for a while, Elias repairing what could be repaired and stacking what couldn't in a corner for firewood. Constance swept and scrubbed, trying to erase the evidence of violence from her establishment. Around mid-morning, a few of her regulars started trickling in, brave souls or fools, hard to say which. One of them was an older man named Henry Moss, who'd worked as a blacksmith before arthritis took his hands. He sat at the bar nursing a beer and watching Elias work. You got everyone talking, Henry said. So I hear. Half the town thinks you're some kind of hero. Other half thinks you're going to get us all killed. What do you think? Henry took a long drink. I think you did what needed doing, and I think Briggs needed taking down a notch. But I also think notches don't stay down. They spring back up, usually meaner than before. Probably right. So what's your play here? You going to fight Briggs again? Kill him? Run? Haven't decided. Well, you better decide quick, because Sheriff Dobbs is heading this way with a rifle. Elias looked up. Sure enough, through the window he could see Dobbs coming up the street, moving with the kind of false confidence that comes from holding a weapon you're not entirely comfortable using. Behind him came 3 of Briggs's boys, not the ones from last night, but fresh recruits looking to prove themselves. Elias set down the hammer he'd been using and stood up. This should be interesting, Constance muttered. Dobbs pushed through the door, rifle held at a diagonal across his chest. He was a small man made smaller by his obvious fear, trying to compensate with aggression. His deputy's badge was pinned crooked on his vest. Elias Crow, he said, his voice cracking slightly on the name. You're under arrest. For what? Assault, battery, destruction of property, disturbing the peace, resisting lawful authority. I didn't resist any lawful authority, mainly because I haven't seen any. Dobbs' face flushed. You assaulted 15 men last night. Defended myself against 15 men who drew weapons on me first. There's a difference. That ain't how the witnesses tell it. Which witnesses? The men I was defending myself against? You need to come with me. Now. Elias didn't move. And if I don't? Dobbs raised the rifle slightly. Then I'll be forced to use this. You ever shot a man, Sheriff? You can't just... It's a simple question. You ever pointed that rifle at a human being and pulled the trigger? Dobbs's hands tightened on the weapon. Don't test me, old man. I'm not testing you. I'm asking, because shooting a man changes you. Takes something out of you that you don't get back. And I'm wondering if you've thought about that, if you're ready for that. I'm ready to uphold the law. The law? Right. Elias took a step forward. Tell me, Sheriff, what law says a man can't defend himself? What law says 15 armed men can corner one unarmed old-timer and he's supposed to just take it? You weren't unarmed. You had a knife. I always have a knife. I eat with it. And I didn't draw it until someone else drew first. That's not... The point is... Dobbs was sweating now, the rifle wavering slightly. You're coming with me, one way or another. From the doorway, one of Briggs's boys, a stocky man with a crooked nose named Perkins, spoke up. Just shoot him, Sheriff. Save everyone the trouble of a trial. Dobbs' eyes flickered to Perkins, then back to Elias. I can't just shoot him. Why not? He's resisting arrest. That's what the report'll say. There's witnesses. Witnesses can be convinced. Ain't that right, Mrs. Miller? Constance stepped forward, that sawed-off shotgun suddenly in her hands. The only thing I'm convinced of is that you boys should leave my establishment before I redecorate it with your insides. Perkins's hand dropped to his gun. You threatening an officer of the law? I'm threatening 3 thugs and the coward they brought with them. The law left this building about 2 years ago and hasn't been back since. The tension in the room ratcheted up about 10 notches. Henry Moss quietly slipped off his bar stool and moved toward the back wall. The other patrons did the same, creating space for the violence everyone could feel coming. Elias raised his hands slowly, palms out. Nobody needs to die today. Damn right, Dobbs said, his voice stronger now that he felt like he was regaining control. You're going to come peacefully. And I wasn't talking to you, Sheriff. I was talking to them. Elias nodded toward Perkins and his companions. But because if Mrs. Miller has to use that shotgun, she'll use it. And at this range, she'll cut at least 2 of you in half before you can draw. Then I'll handle whoever's left. And Sheriff Dobbs here will wet himself and run away, because that's what he does. And by the end of it, 3 people will be dead for no good reason except Briggs Calder's wounded pride. You don't know what you're talking about, Perkins said, but his hand moved away from his gun. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been in more gunfights than you've had hot meals, son. And I'm telling you, this one ain't worth it. Dobbs was looking increasingly uncertain. I still gotta bring you in. Briggs will have my badge if I don't. Briggs already has your badge, Elias said. He's just letting you wear it. But fine, you want to arrest me? Arrest me. Take me to your jail. We'll see how that plays out. You're coming willingly? I'm coming without shooting anyone. That's as willing as you're going to get. Dobbs looked relieved and suspicious in equal measure. Turn around. Put your hands behind your back. Elias did as instructed. Dobbs approached cautiously, pulling out a set of iron manacles that looked like they hadn't been used in years. He clamped them around Elias's wrists, fumbling with the lock. If you try anything, Dobbs started. I won't. I already said I'm coming. Constance lowered her shotgun but didn't put it away. This is a mistake, Sheriff. Just doing my job, ma'am. Your job is protecting people, not protecting the man who terrorizes them. The law's the law. The law's whatever Briggs tells you it is, Henry Moss said from his corner. We all know it. Dobbs ignored him, focusing on Elias. Let's go. And don't try anything smart. They walked out into the street, Dobbs behind Elias with the rifle, Perkins and the other 2 flanking them. People stopped what they were doing to watch. Some looked satisfied. Finally, someone putting that troublemaker in his place. Others looked worried, like they knew this was wrong but didn't know how to stop it. Thomas Yates stood outside his mother's boarding house, his face stricken. Elias caught his eye and gave him a small nod. The boy nodded back, but he looked like he might cry. The jail was a squat stone building at the far end of town, built solid to withstand everything from Indian raids to drunk miners. It had 2 cells, both of them empty. Crime in Red Hollow was usually handled more directly, without the formality of incarceration. Dobbs unlocked one of the cells and gestured for Elias to enter. The old man shuffled inside, the manacles still on his wrists. The cell door clanged shut with a finality that echoed in the small space. How long you planning to keep me here? Elias asked. Long as it takes. For what? A trial? Dobbs hesitated. We'll figure that out. Meaning Briggs will figure it out. Meaning it's not your concern anymore. You just sit tight and keep quiet. Dobbs left, taking Perkins and the others with him. The door to the jail slammed shut, leaving Elias alone in the dim cell. He sat down on the cot. Thin mattress, threadbare blanket, smelled like old sweat and desperation, and examined the manacles. Simple lock mechanism. He could probably pick it with a piece of wire if he had a piece of wire, but there was no point. Even if he got out of the cell, where would he go? The whole town knew he was here. Running would just prove Briggs right. No, better to wait. See how this played out. Sometimes the best move was no move at all. The hours crawled past. Sunlight moved across the floor in a slow arc as the day progressed. Nobody came to check on him. Nobody brought food or water. Elias sat quietly, conserving his energy, thinking. Around dusk he heard voices outside the jail. Loud voices. Angry voices. Then the door opened and Briggs Calder walked in, followed by 6 of his men. Briggs looked worse than he had last night. His face was bruised. Elias must have landed a blow he didn't remember, and his eyes had the red-rimmed quality of someone who'd been drinking heavily and recently. He stopped in front of Elias's cell, gripping the bars. "Comfortable?" he asked. "I've had worse." "You know why you're here?" "Because you paid the sheriff to put me here." Briggs smiled without humor. "See, that's your problem, old man. You think you understand how things work, but you don't. You came into my town, disrespected me, hurt my men, and now you think what? That there's going to be some kind of fair trial? That justice is going to prevail?" "I think you're scared," Elias said calmly. "I think last night shook you worse than you want to admit, and now you're trying to figure out how to kill me in a way that doesn't make you look weak." Briggs's knuckles went white on the bars. "I could kill you right now, right here. Who's going to stop me?" "Nobody." "That's why you won't do it." "Explain that." "Because if you kill me in a cell, unarmed and manacled, everyone will know you were afraid of me. They'll know you couldn't beat me in a fair fight, so you had to murder me like a coward. And that story will spread. Other towns, other territories, and every tough guy looking to make a name for himself will come looking for you because they'll know the truth. That Briggs Calder is all bark and no bite." Briggs's jaw worked like he was chewing something tough. "You talk too much." "I talk the truth, which is more than you do." "I'm going to ask you one more time. Who killed my brother?" "I told you I don't know." "But you know why." "I can guess." "Then guess. Out loud." Elias stood up, walked to the bars until he was face to face with Briggs. "Your brother cheated a man named Samuel Turner out of $800 in a poker game. Money Turner had saved for 2 years to buy land, money he needed to bring his wife and daughter out from St. Louis. Your brother took it all in one night with a marked deck and loaded dice." Briggs blinked. "How do you know that?" "Because I asked around. Because people talk if you listen. Because Samuel Turner tried to get his money back through legal means, but the law in this town belongs to you. So he took matters into his own hands." "Turner killed Garrett?" "I'm saying that's what makes sense. Man gets robbed, law won't help him, he gets desperate. Desperate men do desperate things." "Where's Turner now?" "Left town the day after Garrett died. Took his family and went south, from what I hear, probably in Mexico by now." Briggs stared at him. "You're lying. You're just trying to I'm telling you what I learned in one day of listening. You could have learned the same thing 6 months ago if you'd asked instead of threatened. But you didn't want the truth. You wanted revenge, and revenge ain't the same as justice." "It is when you're powerful enough." "No, then it's just cruelty with better press." Briggs stepped back from the cell, breathing hard. His men watched nervously, unsure what was happening. "You think you're smart," Briggs said. "You think you've got it all figured out." "I think I'm old and tired and stuck in a cell. Nothing smart about that." "I could still kill you." "You could. Question is whether it's worth it." "Everything's worth it if it gets me what I want." "And what do you want, Briggs? Really? Because I don't think you know anymore." For just a second, something cracked in Briggs's expression. Something vulnerable and lost, like a child who'd wandered too far from home. Then it hardened again, the mask snapping back into place. "I want you dead," he said. "That's simple enough. Then kill me, or let me go. But stop wasting both our time with this performance." Briggs turned to his men. "Watch him. Make sure nobody gets in or out. I'll be back tomorrow with a decision." He left, his boots heavy on the floorboards. His men settled in around the jail, 3 inside and 3 outside, rotating shifts. Night fell. The jail grew dark except for a single lamp burning on the sheriff's desk. Elias lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the guards talk in low voices. They were nervous. Good. Nervous men made mistakes. Around midnight, he heard a soft tapping on the wall behind his cell, then a voice, barely audible. "Mr. Crow?" Elias sat up. "Who's there?" Thomas Yates. I snuck around back." "You shouldn't be here, son." "I brought you something. Food, water. There's a crack in the stones back here. I can push it through." A moment later, a small bundle wrapped in cloth appeared through a narrow gap between 2 foundation stones. Elias retrieved it. Bread, cheese, a canteen of water. Simple food, but it tasted like mercy. "Thank you," Elias said. "Are they going to kill you?" "Maybe. Probably. That ain't fair?" Fairness is a luxury, Thomas, not a guarantee. My ma says you should have left when you had the chance, but I'm glad you stayed. Why? Because you showed everyone it's possible to stand up, to fight back, even if just for one night. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. Listen to me, Thomas. Don't try to be a hero. Heroes get themselves killed, and they get the people around them killed too. You want to help your ma? Keep your head down and survive. That's heroism enough. But you didn't keep your head down. I'm old. I can afford to be stupid. You're young. You need to be smart. Silence from the other side of the wall. Then, I hope they let you go. Me too, son. Me too. The boy's footsteps retreated into the night. Elias ate the bread and cheese slowly, making it last, drinking just enough water to take the edge off his thirst. Then he lay back down and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. He'd face it the way he'd faced everything else in his life, one moment at a time with the tools he had available. And if those tools weren't enough, well, everyone's luck ran out eventually. The question was whether his luck would hold long enough to matter. Morning came with the sound of boots on wood and voices arguing just outside the jail. Elias had been awake for an hour already, watching the light change through the single high window of his cell, listening to the guards change shifts and complain about the heat that was already building, even though the sun had barely cleared the horizon. The door banged open, and Sheriff Dobbs stumbled in, looking like he'd spent the night in a bottle. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hand shook as he fumbled with his keys. "Get up," he said to Elias. "You got a visitor." Elias stood, stretched the kinks out of his back. "Who? Does it matter? Someone wants to see you before—" Dobbs stopped himself, looked away. "Just someone." He unlocked the cell but left the manacles on Elias's wrists, led him through a narrow hallway to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. Constance Miller sat in one of them, her hands folded on the scarred wood surface. She looked tired but determined. 10 minutes, Dobbs said, then left them alone. Constance waited until his footsteps faded before speaking. "How are they treating you?" "Like a prisoner. Can't complain about that." Elias sat down across from her, the chair creaking under his weight. "You shouldn't have come. Briggs finds out you're visiting me. He'll make trouble for you." "Briggs is already making trouble for me. He came by the Broken Spoke this morning with an offer, said he'd buy me out, give me enough money to leave Red Hollow and start over somewhere else. That's more generous than I expected from him. It wasn't generosity. It was a threat dressed up as business. He wants my place shut down, wants to be the only game in town again." She looked at her hands. "I told him to go to hell." "That was brave and stupid in equal measure." "Seems to be going around." She met his eyes. "They're going to kill you, Elias. Tonight, probably. Briggs is calling it a trial, but everyone knows what it really is." "I figured as much. You don't seem worried." "Worry don't change the outcome, just makes the waiting worse." Constance leaned forward. "There's people willing to help. Henry Moss, the Yates family, some of the miners who've been pushed around by Briggs's boys. We could get you out of here, get you on a horse, and out of the territory before anyone notices." "And then what? Briggs burns down your saloon? Hurts those people for helping me? That's not a solution, Constance. That's just passing the problem around." "So you're just going to let him kill you?" "I'm going to see how this plays out. Might surprise you. Or might get you buried in an unmarked grave on the edge of town." Elias shrugged. "We all end up in the ground eventually. At least this way I'll have company." She stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the craziest." "Already told you, I can be both." "This isn't a joke." "I know it's not." "But getting angry about it won't help. Getting scared won't help. All I can do is stay calm and wait for my opening." "What opening? You're locked in a cell, manacled, surrounded by armed men who want you dead. What possible opening could there be?" "Don't know yet, but there's always an opening. You just have to be patient enough to see it." Constance shook her head, frustrated. "I don't understand you." "That makes 2 of us." Elias shifted his weight, trying to find a comfortable position with the manacles on. "Tell me something. Why'd you really come here? Not just to warn me. You could have sent someone else for that." She was quiet for a long moment. "Because you did something nobody else in this town had the guts to do. You stood up when everyone else was sitting down. And I thought you should know that it mattered. Even if it ends badly, It mattered. That's kind of you to say. It's not kindness, it's truth. She stood up. There's something else you should know. Samuel Turner, the man you told Briggs about. What about him? He didn't go to Mexico. He went to his sister's place in Santa Fe, and he's coming back. Elias felt something cold settle in his stomach. Coming back when? Today. Maybe tomorrow. He heard about what happened with you and Briggs, heard that someone was finally standing up to the Calders. He thinks this is his chance to clear his name, to tell everyone what really happened with Garrett. That's a mistake, a bad one. I tried to tell him that, sent word through his sister, but he's determined, says he's tired of running. Running keeps you alive, standing still gets you killed. Maybe he figures being alive don't count for much if you're always afraid. Elias closed his eyes. When did you send word to him? Week ago, before you showed up. I'd been trying to find him for months. Thought if he came back, if he told the truth about Garrett's card games, maybe people would finally see Briggs for what he is. And now I've complicated things. Or made them simpler. I don't know anymore. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you find that opening you're looking for. Me too. Dobbs came back and escorted Constance out, then returned Elias to his cell. The old man sat on his cot and thought about Samuel Turner riding back into Red Hollow with the truth about Garrett Calder. Thought about how that truth would collide with Briggs's need for revenge. Thought about how many people would get caught in the middle. This was getting messy. Messier than he'd anticipated. And messy situations had a way of spiraling out of control. The morning dragged into afternoon. The heat built until the jail felt like an oven. Elias's guards changed shifts again, fresh men replacing tired ones. None of them spoke to him. They just watched, hands on their weapons, waiting. Around 3 o'clock, the door opened again and Briggs walked in. He'd cleaned himself up since last night. Fresh clothes, shaved face, hair combed back. He looked almost respectable, almost civilized. But his eyes gave him away. They had that dead flat quality that came from making a decision you couldn't take back. We're having your trial in an hour, Briggs said. Thought you should know. Trial implies a judge, implies a jury. You got either of those? I'm the judge. The town's the jury. That's how we do things out here. That's not how trials work. It's how this one's going to work. Briggs pulled up a chair, sat down backward on it with his arms crossed over the backrest. I want you to understand something. This isn't personal anymore. It was always personal. Maybe. But now it's about something bigger. It's about order. About showing this town that there are consequences for disruption. You disrupted things. So there's going to be consequences. Consequences like a bullet in my head? If that's what the jury decides. Briggs studied him. You could make this easier on yourself. Confess to killing Garrett. Say you were hired by someone. Name some names. I'll make sure your death is quick. I didn't kill your brother. But you know who did. I told you what I know. Samuel Turner had motive and opportunity. Whether he actually pulled the trigger, I can't say for certain. Turner's a coward. He wouldn't have the guts. Cowards do brave things when they're desperate enough. You'd know that if you'd spent less time being the boot and more time being the person under it. Briggs's jaw tightened. You got a smart mouth for someone about to die. If I'm going to die anyway, might as well speak my mind. What have I got to lose? Fair point. Briggs stood up, pushed the chair back into place. 1 hour. I'll have them bring you to the Silver Spur. That's where we're holding the trial. Public setting. Everything proper and legal. Nothing about this is legal. Everything's legal if you've got enough guns backing you up. That's the real law out here. Not books and judges and fancy courtrooms. Just force. Who's got it and who don't? Elias looked at him steadily. That how you want to be remembered? As a man who ruled through fear? I want to be remembered at all. Most men ain't. They live quiet lives and die quiet deaths, and 50 years later nobody knows they existed. At least people will remember Briggs Calder. They'll remember you the way they remember Garrett, as a cautionary tale. Better than being forgotten. Briggs left. His guards remained, watching Elias with the nervous energy of men who knew something bad was about to happen and couldn't do anything to stop it. Elias lay back on his cot and thought about his options. They weren't good. He could try to fight his way out, probably get shot in the process. He could go along with this farce of a trial, definitely get shot in the process. Or he could wait for that opening he'd told Constance about, the one he wasn't entirely sure existed. Not great choices, but they were the only ones he had. The hour passed quickly, too quickly. Guards came and hauled him to his feet, marched him out of the jail and down the street toward the Silver Spur. People lined the boardwalks, watching in silence. Some looked sympathetic. Most just looked curious, the way people always are when they're about to see violence. Thomas Yates stood outside his mother's boarding house again, his face pale. The boy started to move toward Elias, but his mother, a thin woman with hard eyes and a harder life written in the lines of her face, grabbed his arm and held him back. Inside the Silver Spur, chairs had been arranged in rough rows facing a cleared area near the bar. Briggs sat at a table that served as a judge's bench, looking every bit the authority figure. Sheriff Dobbs stood beside him, trying to look official and mostly just looking drunk. The guards pushed Elias into a chair at the front. The manacles stayed on. The room filled up quickly. Seemed like half the town had turned out for the show. Elias scanned the crowd. Constance was there, sitting in the back with Henry Moss, the merchant Jessup, some miners, some ranch hands, all the people who lived under Briggs's thumb, here to watch what happened when someone bit the hand that fed them. Briggs stood up and the room quieted. "We're here to address a crime," he said, his voice carrying. "Elias Crow stands accused of assault, battery, and murder." That last word sent a murmur through the crowd. Elias's eyes narrowed. "Murder?" he said. "I haven't killed anyone." "Not yet. But you confess to knowing who killed my brother Garrett. That makes you an accessory. And accessories hang same as the shooter." "That's not what accessory means." "It's what it means today." Briggs looked at the crowd. "This man came into our town and brought nothing but trouble. He attacked 15 men without provocation. He threatened officers of the law. And he's admitted to concealing information about a murder. Those are the facts." "The facts," Elias said, "are that I defended myself against 15 armed men who surrounded me with intent to harm. The facts are that your so-called officers of the law are just thugs with badges. And the facts are that I told you what I learned about your brother's death because you asked. You hear that?" Briggs addressed the crowd again. "He don't even deny it, just makes excuses." "They're not excuses, they're context. But I guess context don't matter when you've already made up your mind." Briggs pointed at Elias. "You want to know the real context? This man represents everything that's wrong with drifters. They come into our towns, cause problems, then move on before they have to deal with the consequences. Well, not this time. This time, there's going to be consequences." From the back of the room, Constance stood up. "This is wrong, Briggs. Everyone here knows it." "Sit down, Mrs. Miller." "I won't. This man saved my life, saved my business, and you're trying to kill him for it." "I said sit down." "Make me." The room held its breath. For a long moment, Briggs stared at Constance with naked fury in his eyes. Then he seemed to remember he was performing for the town, that this was supposed to look legitimate, and he forced himself to calm down. "You can speak," he said. "Tell us what happened, from your perspective." Constance moved to the front of the room, stood near Elias's chair. "Your boys came into my place demanding money I'd already paid. When I refused, they threatened to burn me out. Mr. Crow here intervened because it was the right thing to do. He gave them every chance to walk away. They chose to fight instead." "That's your version." "That's the truth. Ask anyone who was there." Briggs looked around. "Anyone else want to testify?" Henry Moss stood up slowly, his arthritic hands gripping the back of the chair in front of him. "She's right. I saw the whole thing. Dutch and his boys started it. Elias just finished it." "You were drunk," Briggs said. "I'm always drunk. Don't mean I'm blind." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Briggs's face darkened. "Anyone else? Anyone want to contradict the evidence?" Silence. The people who'd been in the Broken Spoke that night all looked away, unwilling to meet Briggs's eyes. Fear was a powerful thing. It made cowards of even good people. Briggs nodded, satisfied. "Then the verdict is clear. Elias Crow is guilty of all charges. The sentence is death by hanging, to be carried out at sunset." The room erupted. People talking over each other, some agreeing, some protesting. Constance was shouting something, but Elias couldn't make out the words over the noise. The guards grabbed him and started hauling him toward the door. Oops. And then someone else stood up near the back of the room. A man Elias had never seen before. Tall and rangy, with sun-darkened skin and hands that looked like they'd done hard labor. He wore a dusty coat and a hat that had seen better days. His face was weathered but young, couldn't have been more than 30. "I killed Garrett Calder," the man said. The room went silent so fast it felt like the air had been sucked out. Briggs turned slowly. "What did you say?" "I said I killed him, Garrett Calder, 6 months ago, behind this saloon, shot him once in the chest and left him in the dirt." The man took off his hat. "My name's Samuel Turner, and I'm here to tell you why I did it." Briggs stared at him like he was seeing a ghost. The guards holding Elias had gone slack, their attention fixed on Turner. The whole town was frozen, waiting. "You," Briggs said. His voice came out strangled. "You ran. You left town." "I did. I was scared, but I'm tired of being scared, tired of running, so here I am." Turner took a step forward. "Your brother cheated me. Took $800 I'd saved for 2 years. Money I needed to bring my family out here. When I asked for it back, when I showed him proof the deck was marked, he laughed in my face, said I couldn't prove nothing, said if I made trouble you'd make sure I disappeared." "That's a lie. It's the truth. Ask anyone who played cards with Garrett. They'll tell you the same thing if they're honest. He was a cheat, a liar, and he got what was coming to him." Briggs's hand dropped to his gun. "You confessing to murder? You better be ready to back that up." "I am." Turner's hand hovered near his own weapon. "But I ain't the only one with blood on my hands. How many people you hurt, Briggs? How many lives you ruined? Your brother was just following your example. My brother was a coward and a thief, same as you." Briggs drew. Turner drew faster. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. People screamed and dove for cover. Elias threw himself sideways out of his chair, hitting the floor hard as bullets started flying. But Turner's shot went wide. Intentionally, Elias realized. He wasn't trying to kill Briggs, he was trying to force a confrontation. Briggs's shot went wide too, but not intentionally. His hand was shaking with rage and he couldn't aim straight. He fired again, and Turner was moving, ducking behind the bar, returning fire. In the chaos, Elias rolled to his feet. The guards had scattered, trying to avoid the crossfire. He spotted one of them fumbling for keys on his belt, the keys to the manacles. Elias closed the distance in 3 steps, drove his shoulder into the man's gut, and used the momentum to slam him into the wall. The keys fell. Elias scooped them up with bound hands, twisted away from a grabbing arm, and stumbled toward the back door. Behind him, the gunfight continued. Turner was shouting something about justice. Briggs was shouting back about murder. The whole saloon had descended into pandemonium, people running, furniture overturning, glass breaking. Elias burst through the back door into the alley. His hands were still manacled, but at least he was out of immediate danger. He worked the key into the lock, his fingers clumsy with urgency. The first manacle clicked open, then the second. He dropped them in the dirt and ran, not away from town. That would be too obvious. Instead, he ran toward the livery stable, toward Molly, toward the gear he'd need if this was going to turn into something bigger than a bar fight. The stable was empty when he arrived. He saddled Molly quickly, muscle memory taking over. Grabbed his saddlebags, checked the weapons he kept wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom. A revolver, old but well-maintained. A rifle. Ammunition. A knife that was more tool than weapon but could serve both purposes. He strapped on the gun belt, loaded the revolver, and stood there for a moment trying to decide his next move. Back at the Silver Spur, guns were still firing. People were screaming. This whole thing had spiraled exactly the way Elias had feared it would. Turner showing up, confessing, starting a shootout. It was brave and stupid and probably suicidal. But it had also created an opening. The question was what to do with it. Elias could leave. Mount up right now, right out of Red Hollow, and never look back. Let Turner and Briggs kill each other. Let the town sort out its own problems. Or he could go back. Try to end this before more people got hurt. He thought about Thomas Yates and his mother, about Constance Miller and her shotgun, about Henry Moss and all the other people who'd lived under Briggs's rule for too long, about the choice between running and standing, between self-preservation and something that might matter more. He thought about the man he used to be before the war, before everything went wrong. The man who believed in doing the right thing even when it was hard. Then he climbed into the saddle and turned Molly back toward the Silver Spur. Because some openings only came once. And if you didn't take them, you spent the rest of your life wondering what might have been different if you had. The ride back to the Silver Spur took less than 2 minutes, but felt like an hour. Elias could hear the gunfire before he even saw the building, sharp cracks echoing off the false front storefronts, punctuated by shouting and the crash of breaking glass. Smoke was already starting to curl out from under the batwing doors. He dismounted a block away, tied Molly to a hitching post where she'd be clear of the chaos, and approached on foot with the rifle in his hands. The street had emptied, people taking cover in doorways and behind water troughs, smart enough to get out of the line of fire, but too curious to run away completely. Through the saloon's front windows, Elias could see muzzle flashes. Turner was still behind the bar, using it as cover while he traded shots with Briggs and what remained of his men. The place was being torn apart, mirrors shattered, bottles exploding, tables splintered by stray bullets. Elias counted 6 of Briggs's boys still in the fight, plus Briggs himself. Turner was alone and running low on ammunition if the increasing gaps between his shots meant anything. This was going to end badly for him unless someone changed the equation. Elias took a breath, checked his rifle one more time, and walked through the front door like he was entering church on Sunday. The fighting stopped immediately. Everyone turned to look at him. Briggs with blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. Turner with his back pressed against the liquor shelves, the guards with their guns half raised and confusion written all over their faces. "The hell are you doing here?" Briggs demanded. "You're supposed to be locked up." "Was locked up, got out. Seemed like you needed help ending this before someone burns the whole town down." Elias gestured at the spreading fire in the corner where an overturned oil lamp had caught the curtains. "That's going to be a problem in about 5 minutes." One of Briggs's men, the one called Perkins, raised his gun toward Elias. "Don't move, old man." "I'm not the one you should be worried about." Elias nodded toward the flames. "Fire don't care who owns the building. It'll burn us all the same." Briggs wiped blood from his eye, smearing it across his cheek. "Put the fire out, you and you." He pointed at 2 of his men. They hesitated, not wanting to turn their backs on Turner, but eventually grabbed blankets and started beating at the flames. Elias used the distraction to move closer to the bar, positioning himself between Briggs and Turner. "This needs to stop, right now." "Step aside," Briggs said. "This don't concern you anymore." "It concerns me the minute you decided to hold a sham trial in front of the whole town. It concerns me when bullets start flying in a room full of innocent people." He looked at Turner. "You okay back there?" Turner's face was pale, sweat running down his temples despite the evening cool. "I'm hit. Not bad, but I'm hit." "Where?" "Left arm. Went clean through, I think." Can you still shoot?" "If I have to." Elias turned back to Briggs. "Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Turner is going to stand up, put his weapon down, and tell his story. You're going to listen. Then we're going to figure out what actual justice looks like. Because whatever this is, it ain't it." Briggs laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think you can just walk in here and dictate terms? You're outnumbered 6-1. 7-2, Constance's voice came from the doorway. She stood there with her sawed-off shotgun leveled at Briggs's back. "And at this range, I can cut 3 of you in half before you turn around." 8-2, Henry Moss said, appearing beside her with an old hunting rifle that looked like it might have fought in the Mexican War. "Or 3, I guess, depending on how you count." Then more people started filing in. The merchant Jessup with a pistol that shook in his hands. 2 of the miners carrying pickaxe handles. A woman Elias didn't recognize holding a cast-iron skillet like a weapon. Thomas Yates's mother with a butcher knife. And Thomas himself carrying his father's old Navy Colt revolver in both hands, pointing it at the floor but present nonetheless. Briggs stared at them all like he was seeing ghosts. "What is this?" "This is your town finding its backbone," Constance said. "We're done being scared of you, Briggs. You shoot me, and my boys will kill every last one of you. Maybe. Or maybe they'll realize they're outgunned and outnumbered and decide dying for your pride ain't worth it." She looked at the guards. "What do you boys say? You want to die today? For him?" The guards looked at each other, looked at Briggs, looked at the armed townspeople surrounding them. Perkins lowered his gun first, Then the others followed, one by one, until only Briggs still had his weapon drawn. Cowards, Briggs spat. All of you, cowards and traitors. We're practical, Perkins said. There's a difference. Briggs's gun hand was shaking now, with rage or fear or both. I built this town. I kept order when there was nothing but chaos. You think you can just throw me aside, replace me? You didn't build this town, Elias said quietly. The people built it. You just convinced them you owned it, but you don't. You never did. I own everything here. Every business, every building, You own property. You don't own people. There's a difference, and you've spent so long confusing the two that you can't see it anymore. Briggs aimed his gun at Elias's chest. I could kill you right now. End this whole thing. You could try, but you'd be dead before you hit the floor, and you know it. Elias took a step closer, deliberately putting himself in the line of fire. Put the gun down, Briggs. It's over. It's not over. It's never over. You think killing me changes anything? Someone else will just take my place. That's how it works. There's always someone stronger, always someone willing to do what needs doing. Maybe. But it won't be you. And maybe the next person will be better. Maybe they'll remember what happened here and choose different. That's all we can hope for. For a long moment, Briggs just stood there, gun raised, breathing hard through his nose like a bull deciding whether to charge. Then slowly, he lowered the weapon. Not because he wanted to, not because he was convinced, but because the math had finally penetrated his skull. One man against a room full of armed townspeople was a losing proposition no matter how tough you thought you were. He set the gun on a table, stepped back with his hands raised. Fine. You win. For now. This isn't about winning, Elias said. This is about doing right by everyone, including you. Don't do me any favors, old man. Wasn't planning to. Elias turned to Turner. You still alive back there? Barely. Turner stood up slowly, his left arm hanging useless at his side, blood soaking through his shirt. I can tell my story now, like you said. Sit down first, before you fall down. Someone, the woman with the skillet, helped Turner to a chair. Constance produced a clean cloth and started wrapping his arm while he talked. His voice was shaky but determined. Garrett Calder ran a poker game every Friday night. Back room, high stakes, invitation only. I got invited 6 months ago through a mining foreman who owed me a favor. Thought it'd be a good way to make some extra money. Maybe speed up bringing my family west. He winced as Constance pulled the bandage tight. First 2 games I lost small, nothing I couldn't handle. Third game I won big, $400. Garrett didn't like that. Next game, I noticed things. Cards that bent in certain ways. Dice that landed heavy on specific numbers. I kept quiet, tried to get out ahead, but Garrett kept raising until I was all in. And he took everything, Elias said. $840. Everything I had. When I accused him of cheating, he laughed. Said, prove it. Said even if I could, who'd believe a nobody miner over a Calder? Turner looked at Briggs. I went to your brother first, tried to reason with him. He threatened to have me beaten if I didn't shut my mouth. So I went to Sheriff Dobbs. Dobbs, still standing near the wall, wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. The sheriff said there was nothing he could do without evidence. Said card games were buyer beware. Said maybe I should learn not to gamble with money I couldn't afford to lose. Turner's voice hardened. So I waited. Followed Garrett for 2 weeks. Learned his patterns. And one night when he was coming back from the saloon alone, drunk and mean like always, I confronted him in that alley. You shot him, Briggs said flatly. I asked him for my money back. Begged him, actually. Told him about my wife, my little girl, how they were waiting in St. Louis for me to send money for their train tickets. He laughed in my face. Said his money now, his rules. Pulled a knife and came at me. Turner looked down at his hands. I had my gun. Didn't even think about it. Just pulled and fired. He went down and I ran. Didn't stop running till I hit Santa Fe. The room was silent. Even the fire, now mostly smothered, had stopped crackling. Briggs spoke first. You murdered my brother. I killed him. There's a difference. Not to me. Then you're not listening. Turner stood up, wavering slightly. Your brother was a cheat and a thief. He took from people who couldn't afford it. He did it over and over, and you let him because it benefited you. How many other people lost everything to Garrett's games? How many lives did he ruin? That doesn't give you the right to. It gives me the right to defend myself when he pulls a knife. That's what the law says. That's what justice says. Your brother made his choices and he paid for them, same as I'm about to pay for mine. Elias stepped between them again. Nobody's paying for anything tonight except with truth. Mr. Turner told his story. Now everyone here knows what happened. What we do with that information is up to us. We hold a trial, Constance said. A real one, not the farce Briggs was planning. And who's going to judge it? Briggs demanded. You? Him? He pointed at Elias. The drifter who showed up 3 days ago? The town judges it, Henry Moss said. All of us together. We hear the evidence, we vote, we decide. That's how justice is supposed to work. That's mob rule. No, Elias said. Mob rule is what you've been doing. This is democracy. Messy and imperfect, but better than one man deciding everything. Briggs looked around at the faces surrounding him. His former employees, the people he'd terrorized, the town he thought he owned. Something in his expression cracked. Not surrender exactly, more like recognition. The understanding that the game had changed and he no longer held the winning hand. Fine, he said. Have your trial. But I get to speak too. I get to tell my side. Fair enough, Elias agreed. Everyone gets heard. That's the deal. They moved the trial to the street. The saloon was too damaged and too small to hold everyone who wanted to attend. Word had spread fast, and people were coming from all over Red Hollow, emerging from houses and shops like prairie dogs after a storm. Someone brought chairs. Someone else brought lanterns as the sun started setting and shadows grew long. Elias found himself standing in front of the crowd almost by accident. He hadn't asked to be the arbiter, hadn't volunteered, but somehow everyone was looking at him like he was supposed to know what to do next. This is new territory for all of us, he said. We don't have a proper courthouse, don't have a trained judge. What we have is a town full of people who've been living under fear for too long. And we have 2 men with competing claims about what happened 6 months ago. Our job is to hear them both and figure out what's true. I already told the truth, Turner said. His arm was properly bandaged now, in a sling that Constance had improvised from a torn shirt. Nothing more to say. There's always more to say, Elias countered. Details matter. Context matters. Did Garrett actually pull a knife on you? He did. Anyone else see it? No. We were alone. Then we only have your word. My word's worth something. I came back, didn't I? Could have stayed in Santa Fe, could have disappeared into Mexico. Instead, I came back to tell the truth. Coming back proves courage. Don't prove innocence. Turner's face reddened. Whose side are you on? Truth's side. Which means I ask hard questions of everyone. Elias turned to Briggs. Your turn. Tell us about your brother, and don't make him a saint. Nobody here will believe it. Briggs stood there in the fading light, blood dried on his face, his empire crumbling around him. For a moment, Elias thought he might refuse. Then he started talking. Garrett was my little brother, 3 years younger. Our parents died when we were kids. Cholera took Ma. Mine accident took Pa. I raised him, fed him, taught him everything he knew. Briggs's voice was rough, like the words were costing him. He wasn't a good man. I know that. He had a mean streak, liked hurting people, liked taking things that weren't his. But he was my brother, my blood. And I protected him because that's what family does. Even when family's wrong, someone in the crowd called out. Especially then, you don't abandon blood just because they disappoint you. But you enable them, Constance said. You create a system where they can hurt people without consequences. That's not protection, Briggs. That's complicity. I kept order. Without me, this town would have torn itself apart years ago. You kept control. There's a difference. Briggs shook his head. You people don't understand. You think you can just vote and everything will be fine. But there's always going to be someone stronger, someone willing to do the ugly work. I was that person. I kept the wolves at bay. By becoming a wolf yourself, Elias said quietly. By doing what needed doing. You don't build something from nothing by being soft. You don't maintain order by being weak. And you don't maintain loyalty by ruling through fear. Look around, Briggs. These people aren't standing with you. They're standing against you. You built your whole life on sand and you're surprised when the tide comes in. Briggs' fists clenched. So what now? You hang me? Run me out of town? Take everything I built? We figure out what justice looks like, Elias said. For both of you. Mr. Turner killed a man. That has consequences. But the circumstances matter. And you, Briggs, you've terrorized this town for years. That has consequences, too. I want a lawyer, Briggs said. If this is a real trial, I get representation. Nearest lawyer's 3 days' ride from here, Henry Moss pointed out. And we all know you can't afford to wait 3 days. Your boys might get brave again. Turner might run. Things might fall apart. Then this isn't a real trial. It's the best we can do, Elias said. Frontier justice has always been rough around the edges, but it's still justice if we're honest about it. He looked at the assembled crowd, maybe 200 people, nearly everyone in Red Hollow. Show of hands. Who thinks Samuel Turner acted in self-defense when he killed Garrett Calder? About half the hands went up, maybe a few more. Who thinks it was murder regardless of circumstances? Fewer hands this time, maybe a third. And who isn't sure? The rest of the hands rose. Elias nodded. That's honest, at least. Now, harder question. Knowing what we know about Garrett's character, about the card games, about how he treated people, who thinks his death was ultimately his own fault? More hands this time. Significantly more. Briggs watched them rise with something like horror in his eyes. That's not justice, he said. That's revenge. You're punishing him for who he was, not what he did. We're acknowledging that actions have consequences, Constance corrected. Your brother spent years taking from people. He finally took from someone who had nothing left to lose. That's not revenge. That's just math. The debate continued as night fell properly and the lanterns became necessary for seeing faces. People argued passionately on both sides. Some thought Turner should hang for killing a man, regardless of circumstances. Others thought he should go free, that Garrett had earned his fate. Still others argued for something in between: exile, restitution, some kind of punishment that acknowledged the complexity of what happened. Through it all, Elias listened and guided, asking questions, challenging assumptions, making sure everyone who wanted to speak got heard. It was messy and chaotic and sometimes circular, but it was also real. People making decisions together instead of having decisions made for them. Finally, as midnight approached and people were starting to flag, Elias called for a final vote. Samuel Turner stands accused of killing Garrett Calder. We've heard testimony. We've debated circumstances. Now we decide. All in favor of finding him guilty of murder and sentencing him to hang, raise your hands. 20 hands went up, maybe 25. Not enough. All in favor of finding him guilty of manslaughter with extenuating circumstances and sentencing him to exile from Red Hollow, raise your hands. More hands. A clear majority. Maybe 150 people. Turner sagged with relief. Briggs looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. The decision is made, Elias said. Mr. Turner, you're guilty of taking a life, but the circumstances matter. You'll leave Red Hollow tomorrow morning and you won't come back. If you do, the exile is void and the original charge of murder stands. Understood? Turner nodded. Thank you. I know it don't make things right, but thank you. Don't thank us. Just live better than your worst moment. That's all anyone can do. Then Elias turned to Briggs. Now for you. The crowd went quiet again. This was the harder question. Turner's crime was clear-cut, however complicated by context. But Briggs hadn't technically broken any laws. He just bent them, twisted them, used them for his own purposes. Briggs Calder, Elias said. You've terrorized this town through fear and violence. You've corrupted the law, abused your power, and created a system where people like your brother could hurt others without consequences. That needs to end. You can't exile me. This is my town. It's not your town, it never was. But you're right, we're not exiling you. Elias looked at the crowd. Show of hands, who thinks Briggs should lose his business holdings in Red Hollow? Nearly every hand went up. Who thinks he should make restitution to the people he's hurt? Same result. And who thinks he should serve jail time for his crimes? Fewer hands, but still a majority. Briggs was shaking his head. You can't do this. You can't just take everything I built. We're not taking it. We're redistributing it. The silver spur gets sold, money divided among the people you've extorted over the years. Your other property's the same. You've got 1 week to compile a list of everyone you owe, everyone you've wronged. After that, we start figuring out restitution. And if I refuse? Then we exile you with nothing but the clothes on your back. Your choice. Briggs looked around desperately, searching for an ally, someone who'd stand with him. But his boys had melted away into the crowd. Even Perkins and the others, who'd been loyal for years, were gone, disappeared into the night to save themselves. This isn't justice, Briggs said again, but his voice was weak now, defeated. This is mob rule. This is 200 people telling you they're done being afraid, Constance said. Call it whatever you want. We're calling it freedom. Elias watched Briggs's face cycle through emotions, rage, denial, bargaining, and finally something that might have been acceptance. Or maybe just exhaustion. Hard to tell in the lamplight. 1 week, Elias repeated, to make this right. After that, we hold another vote on whether you stay or go. But either way, your reign is over. Understand? Briggs didn't answer, just turned and walked away, shoulders hunched, a broken man disappearing into the darkness. The crowd began to disperse, people talking excitedly about what had just happened, about the future, about what Red Hollow might become now that the weight had been lifted. Elias found a quiet spot near the water trough and sat down heavily, feeling every year of his age. Constance found him there a few minutes later. You did good tonight. I didn't do anything. The town did it. You gave them permission. That counts for something. Maybe. Elias rubbed his face, feeling the stubble and the exhaustion. Or maybe I just delayed the inevitable. Someone else will come along. Someone stronger or smarter or meaner. Power abhors a vacuum. Then we'll handle them when they come. Together. She sat down beside him. You staying? Haven't decided. You keep saying that. Because I keep not deciding. She smiled. You're a stubborn man, Elias Crow. I'm a tired man who stumbled into something bigger than he expected. Stumbled, hell, you walked in on purpose. Knew exactly what you were doing. Maybe she was right. Maybe some part of him had seen Red Hollow and recognized the problem and couldn't resist trying to fix it. Old habits, old instincts, the parts of himself he'd tried to bury but never quite managed to kill. What happens tomorrow? He asked. We start building something better. Won't be easy, won't be perfect, but it'll be ours. And Briggs? He'll comply or he won't. Either way, he's finished. The town's seen what's possible now. They won't go back. Elias hoped she was right, but he'd seen enough of human nature to know that fear had deep roots. It took more than one night of courage to kill them completely. Still, this was a start. And sometimes a start was all you needed. The week that followed felt longer than the entire century Elias had lived through. Red Hollow transformed itself slowly, painfully, like a snake shedding old skin. Some changes came easy. Others required blood. Briggs spent the first 3 days locked in his room above the Silver Spur, refusing to come out, refusing to eat, refusing to acknowledge what had happened. His remaining boys scattered. Some left town entirely, others tried to blend into the population like they'd never been enforcers at all. Perkins took a job hauling freight. Another man whose name Elias never learned started working at the livery stable, mucking stalls and keeping his head down. On the 4th day, Briggs emerged. He looked smaller somehow, like defeat had physically shrunk him. His clothes hung loose and his eyes had that hollow quality of someone who'd stopped sleeping. He carried a ledger under one arm, the book where he'd kept track of debts, payments, all the financial threads he'd used to control the town. He found Elias in the Broken Spoke, drinking coffee at the same corner table where this whole mess had started. Here, Briggs said, dropping the ledger on the table. Everything you wanted. Names, amounts, dates, all of it. Elias opened the book, scanned the entries. The handwriting was meticulous, almost obsessive. Every transaction documented, every debt recorded. There were hundreds of names, maybe thousands of transactions. Years of systematic extraction, all laid out in neat columns of ink. This is more than I expected, Elias admitted. I kept good records, always did. Pa taught me that, said a man who don't know his numbers is a man asking to be cheated. Briggs sat down without being invited. How much do I owe? That's for the town to decide, not me. But you're the one in charge now. Nobody's in charge. That's the point. Briggs laughed bitterly. You really believe that? Someone's always in charge. Right now it's you, whether you admit it or not. People look to you. They wait for you to speak before they act. That's power, old man. Maybe you didn't ask for it, but you got it. Then I'll give it back soon as possible. It don't work that way. Power's not something you give away. It's something people take from you when you're not strong enough to hold it anymore. Elias closed the ledger. Is that what happened to you? Someone took it? You took it. You and that damn Turner and all the cowards who finally found their spines. Briggs rubbed his face with both hands. I keep thinking about what you said. About my brother earning what happened to him. Keeps me up at night. Because you know it's true. Because I don't know. I keep going back and forth. One minute I'm convinced Garrett deserved worse than he got. Next minute I'm remembering him as a kid before everything went wrong, when he was just my little brother who looked up to me. Briggs' voice cracked slightly. Which one's real, the monster or the kid? Both. People aren't just one thing. They're all their moments stacked on top of each other, the good and the bad and everything between. That's supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to make you think. Constance came over with fresh coffee, poured them both a cup without asking. She'd been watching Briggs carefully since he walked in, hand never far from that sawed-off shotgun. Old habits died hard. You eating? She asked Briggs. He shook his head. Not hungry. Wasn't really a question. You're eating. Can't have you dying of starvation before you make things right. Bad for business. She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with bread, cheese, and cold chicken. Set it in front of Briggs like a challenge. He stared at the food for a moment, then started eating mechanically, without pleasure or awareness. Just fuel going into a body that needed it. The town meeting's tonight, Elias said. You should be there. To watch them divide up everything I built? To answer questions, to be accountable, to show you're trying. And if I don't want to try? Then you'll be exiled with nothing, and you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for someone you wronged to find you. That's the alternative. Briggs chewed slowly, thinking, What do you think I should do? I think you should face what you've done. Own it. Try to make it right. Won't undo the damage, won't erase the fear, but it's better than running. You sound like a preacher. I sound like someone who's made his share of mistakes. Difference between you and me is I've had time to regret them. You're just starting. The meeting that night was even larger than the trial. Word had spread to neighboring settlements, and people came from miles around to witness Red Hollow reinventing itself. The merchant Jessup had organized everything, brought in extra chairs, set up a podium, created a system for people to speak without everyone shouting over each other. Elias stood at the podium with the ledger open in front of him. The crowd watched expectantly. Farmers and miners and shopkeepers all waiting to hear their names, to learn what they were owed. This book represents years of systematic theft, Elias began. Mr. Calder kept detailed records of every transaction, protection money, inflated debts, forced loans, all of it documented. He looked up at the crowd. We could spend weeks going through every entry, arguing about amounts, disputing claims, or we can approach this different. How? Someone called out. Briggs Calder owns the Silver Spur, 3 rental properties, a share in the general store, and approximately $8,000 in cash and assets. We divide it all equally among everyone he's wronged. No arguments about who deserves more or less. Everyone gets the same share. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, others skeptical. That ain't fair, a miner named Jackson said. He took $20 from me, took $200 from the Mitchells. Why should we get the same? Because fair is impossible to calculate, Elias said. How do you measure fear? How do you quantify years of living under someone's thumb? We can try to parse it out, assign values to suffering, but all that'll do is create resentment. This way, everyone gets something, not what they lost maybe, but something. I like it, Constance said. Clean, simple, done. I don't, Jackson argued. I want what's mine. What's yours is $20, Elias said. Divided equally, you'd probably get about 40. That's double what you lost. Still not enough? Jackson scowled but sat down. The vote was close, but the proposal passed. Over the next 2 hours, they worked out the details. The Silver Spur would be sold to Constance at fair market value. She'd been wanting to expand, and this gave her the opportunity. The rental properties would be sold to their current tenants at reduced rates. The share of the general store would revert to Jessup, and the cash would be distributed based on a census they'd conduct over the next week, making sure everyone who'd been wronged got counted. Briggs sat through all of it in silence, watching his empire get dismantled piece by piece. His face was unreadable. When the votes were finished and the decisions made, Elias asked the final question. Briggs Calder has cooperated with this process. He's provided the records we needed. He's accepted the town's judgment. The question now is whether he stays or goes. All in favor of exile, raise your hands. About half the hands went up, maybe a few more. Not enough for a majority, but close. All in favor of letting him stay under probation, with the understanding that any return to his old ways means immediate exile. Raise your hands. The other half, plus a handful who'd been undecided, enough to carry the vote. The decision is made, Elias announced. Briggs Calder stays, but he stays as a citizen, not a ruler. Same rights as everyone else, same responsibilities, and if he steps out of line, the exile stands. Clear? Briggs stood up slowly. I want to say something. The room went quiet. People leaned forward, curious and wary. I don't know how to do this, Briggs said. His voice was rough, unpracticed at humility. Don't know how to be just another person in a town. Been in charge so long I forgot there was any other way. But I'm going to try. Not because I want to, not because I think you all deserve it, but because the alternative is worse. That's not much of an apology, someone muttered. It's not an apology, it's a statement of intent. I can't apologize for years of wrong in a single speech. Can't make it right with words. All I can do is try to be different going forward, and if I fail, you got my permission to run me out of town on a rail. It wasn't a great speech, wasn't inspiring or moving or particularly remorseful, but it was honest in its inadequacy, and sometimes honesty was enough. The meeting broke up around midnight. People dispersed to their homes, talking excitedly about the future, about what Red Hollow might become. Elias found himself walking alone down the main street, listening to the sound of his boots on the boards, feeling the desert night air cool against his skin. He'd been in town almost 2 weeks now, longer than he'd stayed anywhere in the past 5 years, longer than he'd intended when he'd ridden in thirsty and tired and looking for cheap whiskey. Thomas Yates caught up with him near the livery stable. The boy was breathing hard like he'd been running. Mr. Crow, wait! Elias stopped, turned. It's late, Thomas. Your ma know where you are? She knows. I told her I had to talk to you. The boy shifted his weight nervously. You're leaving, aren't you? Thinking about it. When? Soon. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe the day after. Thomas's face fell. But we need you here. Things are just starting to get better. If you leave, things will keep getting better without me. That's the whole point. A town that needs one person to function ain't really a town. It's just one person propping everyone else up. But you could stay. Help us build something. You're good at this. I'm good at breaking things and clearing ground. Building something else entirely. That's work for people with roots. I'm just passing through. But you keep saying that, but you're still here. Elias smiled despite himself. You're too smart for your own good. You know that? My ma says the same thing. Thomas looked down at his feet. I just don't want you to go, that's all. I know, son, but staying would be the wrong choice, for me and for this town. You need to learn to stand on your own, all of you. Can't do that if you're looking to me for answers. Will you teach me before you go, like I asked before? How to fight. That's still a bad idea. Please. Just a little. So I can protect my ma if someone like Briggs comes back. Elias studied the boy's earnest face, saw the determination there, and sighed. All right. Tomorrow morning, early. Meet me behind the livery stable. But I'm teaching you how to avoid fights, not how to win them. Big difference. Thomas's face lit up. Thank you, Mr. Crow. Don't thank me yet. You might not like what I teach you. The boy ran off into the night, leaving Elias alone again with his thoughts. The next morning came cold and clear. the kind of desert dawn that made everything look sharp-edged and new. Elias met Thomas behind the livery stable as promised. The boy had brought water and looked ready for anything. "First lesson," Elias said. "Most fights can be avoided entirely if you pay attention to what's happening around you. You see trouble coming, you leave before it arrives. That's not cowardice. That's intelligence. But what if I can't leave? What if they corner me? Then you make yourself not worth the effort. Give them what they want if it's just money or pride. Run if you can. Only fight if there's no other choice." "But you fought." "I'm old. I got less to lose. You're young. You got your whole life ahead of you. Don't throw it away trying to prove something." They spent an hour going through scenarios, how to read body language, how to de-escalate with words, how to position yourself near exits, how to use your environment. Elias showed him a few basic defensive moves, how to break a grip, how to create distance, how to protect your head if things went sideways. "You're not teaching me how to hurt people," Thomas observed. "No, I'm teaching you how to survive people who want to hurt you. Big difference." "But what if I need to fight back? What if running's not enough?" Elias was quiet for a moment. "You really want to know?" "Yes." "Then here's the truth. Fighting's ugly and painful, and nobody wins even when they win. You hit someone hard enough to stop them. You break bones. You cause damage. They hit you back. Same thing happens. Best case, you both walk away hurt and angry. Worst case, someone doesn't walk away at all, and you carry that with you forever. You've killed people." It wasn't a question. Elias didn't try to deny it. "I have. More than I can count. Some deserved it. Some didn't. All of them changed me. Took something from me that I'll never get back." He looked Thomas in the eye. "You want that for yourself? You want to spend the rest of your life remembering faces, hearing voices, wondering if maybe there was another way?" Thomas shook his head slowly. "Then learn to avoid fights. Learn to talk. Learn to run. And only when there's absolutely no other choice, only when it's life or death, then you fight with everything you have. But you do it knowing the cost, knowing that violence takes from everyone involved." They practiced a while longer, then Elias called it quits. Thomas thanked him awkwardly and headed home. Elias watched him go, hoping the boy would remember the lessons, hoping he'd never need to use them. The rest of the day, Elias spent settling his affairs. He paid his tab at the Broken Spoke, made sure Molly was well fed and rested, checked his gear, repaired what needed repairing, discarded what was too worn to keep. Around sunset, Constance found him in his room at the boarding house, a small space he'd rented from Thomas's mother, barely big enough for a bed and a chair. "You're really leaving," she said. "I am. We could use you here. Help establish some kind of law enforcement. Make sure things don't backslide." "You don't need me for that. Henry Moss would make a good sheriff. He's respected. People trust him." "Henry's hands don't work right anymore." "Don't need working hands to think clearly. And that's what you need more than anything else. Clear thinking and fair judgment." Constance sat on the edge of the bed. "What about Briggs? You really think he'll stay reformed?" "No idea. But that's not my problem to solve. It's yours. Whole town's, really. You watch him, you hold him accountable, and if he slips, you handle it together. That's how communities work." "And you? Where will you go?" "West, probably, or south. Haven't decided. Just away from here." "Running from something or toward something?" Elias smiled. "Both. Neither. Don't really know anymore." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. "The town took a collection. Wanted to thank you. It's not much, but I can't take that. You can and you will. You helped save this town. Least we can do is make sure you've got supplies for the road." Elias took the pouch, felt the weight of coins inside. More than he expected. More than he deserved, probably. "Thank you. Thank you for everything. For standing up when nobody else would. For showing us it was possible. I just did what needed doing. That's what heroes always say." "I'm not a hero, Constance. I'm just tired and stubborn and too old to know better." She stood up, leaned down, and kissed his weathered cheek. "Heroes never think they're heroes. That's what makes them heroes." Then she left, closing the door softly behind her. Elias sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the town settle in for the night. Somewhere someone was playing a fiddle. Somewhere else, children were laughing. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds, the kind of sounds a town made when it wasn't living in fear. He'd done that. Not alone, never alone. But he'd been the spark, the catalyst. And now it was time to step back and let the fire burn on its own. Morning came too early and exactly on time. Elias loaded his saddlebags, checked Molly's shoes, made sure everything was secure. The sun was just breaking over the eastern ridge when he led the horse out of the stable. A crowd had gathered in the street. Not the whole town, but enough. Constance and Henry, Thomas and his mother, Jessup, a dozen others. Even Briggs stood at the back, watching silently. "Didn't think we'd let you leave without saying goodbye," Constance said. "I'm not good at goodbyes." "Then just say you'll come back sometime. Visit, see how we're doing." "Maybe, if I'm passing through." Thomas stepped forward. "I'll practice what you taught me, every day." "Good, and remember, avoid fights when possible. Only fight when there's no other choice." "I remember." Elias mounted up, settled into the saddle with a familiar creak of leather. From horseback, the whole town looked smaller, more manageable, like maybe they really could figure things out on their own. "One more thing," Henry Moss called up. "You never told us. Who were you before all this? Someone mentioned you moved like you had training, military maybe, or law enforcement." Elias thought about lying, thought about giving them some romantic story that would make sense of everything. But these people deserved the truth, or as much of it as he could give. "I was a lot of things," he said. "Soldier, scout, marshal for a while in Kansas. All of that was a long time ago. Different life, different man. And now I'm just someone trying to figure out how to live with what I've done. Same as everyone else." He touched his hat brim in farewell, turned Molly toward the western road, and rode out of Red Hollow without looking back. The desert stretched out before him, endless and indifferent. He rode for hours, letting the rhythm of the horse lull him into something like peace. By midday, Red Hollow was just a smudge on the horizon behind him. By evening, it was gone entirely. 5 years passed. Elias drifted through the territories, never staying long, never putting down roots. He worked odd jobs, ranch hand, freight guard, sometimes just helping people with problems they couldn't solve themselves. He tried to avoid trouble, but trouble had a way of finding him anyway. His reputation spread quietly, whispered among people who needed help and had nowhere else to turn. The old man who'd cleaned up Red Hollow, the drifter who'd taken down Briggs' Calder. He never confirmed or denied the stories, just kept moving. Then one afternoon in the spring of 1892, Elias was camped near a creek in New Mexico when a rider approached. Young man, barely 20, with the kind of desperate energy that usually meant trouble. "Are you Elias Crow?" the rider asked. Elias looked up from the fire where he was brewing coffee. "Depends who's asking." "My name's Daniel Fisher. I'm from a town called Silver Point, about 3 days north of here. We're in trouble, bad trouble, and someone said you might be able to help." "I'm not a hired gun." "We don't need a gun. We need someone who knows how to stand up to power, how to organize people, how to make them believe things can be different." Elias studied the young man's face, saw the hope there mixed with fear, saw himself at that age still believing the world could be fixed if you just tried hard enough. "Tell me about Silver Point," he said. Daniel told him. And it was Red Hollow all over again. Different names, different faces, same story. A man with power using it to crush everyone beneath him. A town living in fear, waiting for someone to show them another way. Elias listened to the whole thing while his coffee got cold. When Daniel finished, he was quiet for a long time. "I'm old," he finally said. "Older than I look. Older than I feel. I'm tired, and I've earned the right to rest. I know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, but I also remember what it feels like to be afraid, to live under someone's boot and not see a way out." Elias stood up, joints popping. 3 days north, you said?" Daniel's face lit up. "You'll come?" "I'll come. But just to look, just to see if there's anything I can do. No promises beyond that." "That's enough. That's more than enough." They rode out the next morning, Elias on Molly, older now but still steady, and Daniel on a bay gelding that had seen better days. They talked as they traveled, Daniel explaining the details of Silver Point's troubles, Elias asking questions, piecing together the situation. It was familiar in all the wrong ways. On the third day, they crested a rise and saw Silver Point spread out in the valley below, bigger than Red Hollow, more established, but with that same feeling of a place holding its breath, waiting for something to break. "That's it," Daniel said. "That's home." Elias looked at the town and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not quite hope, not quite purpose. Something between the two. The sense that maybe he had one more fight left in him, one more chance to make a difference. "Tell me again who's running things down there," he said. "Man named Vickers, Theodore Vickers. He owns the mines and most of the businesses. Came in 5 years ago promising prosperity and stability. Delivered both, but at a price. Now he owns everything and everyone. Anyone who crosses him disappears." "Disappears how?" "Sometimes they leave town. Sometimes they just stop being seen. Nobody asks too many questions." Elias nodded slowly. "And you want me to do what exactly?" "Same thing you did in Red Hollow. Show people they don't have to be afraid, that they can stand up, that things can change." "That was 5 years ago. I'm 5 years older, 5 years slower. But you're here. That's what matters." They rode down into Silver Point as the sun was setting, painting the buildings gold and red. People watched them pass with the wary eyes of folks who'd learned not to trust strangers. Elias felt those eyes on him, felt the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders. He'd sworn he wouldn't do this again. Had promised himself after Red Hollow that he was done playing hero, done getting involved in other people's problems. But here he was anyway, because some men carried a responsibility that never ended. Some men looked at injustice and couldn't just ride past it, no matter how tired they were, no matter how much easier it would be to keep moving. Elias Crow was one of those men. He didn't want to be. He'd tried not to be. But wanting and being were different things, and at some point you had to accept who you were instead of who you wished you could be. They found a stable for the horses, a boarding house with vacancies, a saloon that served passable whiskey. Daniel introduced him to a few trusted people, miners who'd been wronged, shopkeepers tired of being extorted, families living in fear. The stories were heartbreaking and familiar. But beneath the fear, Elias saw something else. The same spark he'd seen in Red Hollow. The tiny flame of resistance that just needed someone to blow on it gently, give it oxygen, help it grow into something that could burn away the rot. That night, lying in another unfamiliar bed in another unfamiliar town, Elias thought about the road that had brought him here. All the choices, all the fights, all the people he'd helped and failed to help. He thought about Red Hollow and wondered if they were still doing okay. Wondered if Briggs had stayed reformed or slipped back into his old ways. Wondered if Thomas had grown up brave or careful or some combination of both. He'd never know. That was the price of moving on. You left and you never looked back because looking back made you doubt whether leaving had been the right choice. But tomorrow he'd wake up in Silver Point. Tomorrow he'd start asking questions, listening to stories, piecing together the puzzle of how Theodore Vickers controlled this town. Tomorrow he'd begin the slow work of showing people they were stronger than they knew. Tomorrow, the whole thing would start again. And the day after that, and the day after that, until either Vickers was broken or Elias was. He closed his eyes and let the darkness take him, already dreaming of the fight to come. Because that's what men like him did. They fought. Not because they wanted to, not because they were heroes, but because when the moment came, when injustice stood in front of them demanding to be acknowledged, they couldn't do anything else. The quiet man in the violent town, the old-timer who refused to sit down, the drifter who stumbled into problems and couldn't leave until they were solved. That was his role, his burden, his choice. And somewhere between the choosing and the accepting, Elias Crow had found something that looked almost like peace. Not the peace of a man who'd stopped fighting, but the peace of a man who'd accepted that he never would. And that was enough.